Hello everyone. Let me ask you a question. What do you imagine when you picture your later years? Maybe it's evenings filled with the laughter of children, little footsteps echoing down the hallway. Perhaps it's the aroma of warm family meals, your children gathered around the table, your grandchildren climbing into your lap to hear a story only you can tell. It sounds like bliss, doesn't it? The dream so many of us hold close, to never be alone, to always be needed, to spend the final chapters of life surrounded by love. But what if this beautiful vision, this dream that feels so natural, so safe, might hide a truth that no one talks about? What if the very thing we long for most could quietly steal the freedom, the peace, and even the happiness we thought it would bring? Meet Eleanor. She is 72 years old, widowed, a woman who spent her life as a devoted wife, a caring mother, and a friend others could always rely on. When her husband passed away, Eleanor felt a hollow space open inside her. The silence of her apartment seemed to stretch for miles. Meals became quiet affairs. Days blurred into each other. Nights were the hardest, long hours alone with nothing but the ticking clock for company. Her son Marcus, always dutiful and loving, noticed the loneliness in her voice during their phone calls. He and his wife Clara insisted that she move in with them. "It will be easier for all of us," they said. "The children will adore having their grandmother close. You'll never be alone again." At first, Eleanor hesitated. She valued her independence, her small routines, the freedom to spend her time as she wished. But the thought of waking each morning to the sound of her grandchildren's laughter, it was irresistible. Her heart swelled with the possibility of being not just nearby, but woven into the fabric of their daily lives. She imagined herself as a guiding light, a comforting presence, the wise grandmother who held the family together. This is what life was always meant to be. Family warmth, laughter. She believed she had finally stepped into the golden dream every elder longs for, to spend her later years wrapped in the embrace of those she loved most. But time has a way of revealing truths hidden behind the glow of first impressions. As weeks melted into months, the rhythm of Eleanor's new life began to change. The joyful occasional help she once offered quietly transformed into a full-time responsibility. What felt like a gift at first began to feel like a contract she never signed. Eleanor became the morning alarm, the one to rouse sleepy children when Clara and Marcus were busy with work. She was the lunchbox packer, the afternoon tutor, the evening chef. And when the night fell and everyone else retreated to their own rooms, Eleanor often found herself awake again, comforting a frightened child in the dark. Her days, once painted with freedom, were now sketched in by others. She no longer decided when to sip her tea, when to read a book, or when to take a quiet stroll outside. Each hour seemed accounted for, but not by her. At first, she told herself it was temporary, that it was just the natural busyness of family life. But slowly she realized she had traded one kind of loneliness for another. The loneliness of living in a crowded house where her time was no longer her own. Little by little, Eleanor felt herself fading. Her independence, once her proudest possession, slipped quietly through her fingers. She remembered her old apartment, the quiet mornings when she could decide whether to read or to simply watch clouds drift by. The evenings when she could call a friend without checking a schedule. That freedom now felt like a distant dream. The house was full, yes, full of laughter, full of noise, full of movement. But beneath it all, Eleanor felt an emptiness that was harder to name. The irony struck her. She had moved in to escape loneliness, but in the swirl of constant duty, She had never felt more alone. This isn't just Eleanor's story. Across the world, thousands of grandparents find themselves in the same quiet struggle. On the surface, it looks like a blessing being close to family, always surrounded by love. But when grandparents become daily caregivers, the picture changes. Research shows a hidden cost that few people talk about. For example, studies published in PubMed and Sage journals reveal a consistent pattern. Grandparents who step into heavy caregiving roles often report higher levels of stress, declining well-being, and even worsening physical health over time. What feels rewarding in the beginning can slowly chip away at both body and spirit. In a large 2024 study in India, researchers found that caregivers providing more than 40 hours of care per week, essentially a full-time job, reported significantly more depressive symptoms, higher rates of exhaustion, and poorer self-rated health. These elders weren't thriving. They were quietly burning out. Source: Biomed Central. Another investigation found something even more troubling. Grandmothers who take on elevated caregiving responsibilities consistently report greater family strain, more stress, and a steep drop in the sense of reward and recognition. The joy of giving turns into the burden of never having enough to give. Source: PubMed. The evidence is clear. When older adults trade their independence for constant caregiving, they don't just lose free time. They risk losing their health, their identity, and their peace of mind. Eleanor used to begin her mornings in a very different way. She would brew her tea slowly, open the window to let in the morning air, and just decide what she wanted the day to be. Some mornings she'd pick up a novel. Others she'd phone an old friend. Sometimes she'd do nothing at all, and simply let time be her companion. But now, every morning begins the same. The children's breakfast, the school bags, the hurried goodbyes. Her day rotates not around her own choices, but around the needs of others. Her own desires to read, to walk, to paint, to rest have become whispers drowned out by the louder voices of responsibility. Psychologists call this the erosion of autonomy. And in old age, autonomy isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. Without it, a person begins to feel invisible, like a background character in someone else's story. Then there is the toll on the body. Eleanor's back aches from lifting children and bending over endless chores. Her sleep grows shallow, interrupted by the cries of a child in the night. She feels a wave of guilt whenever she longs for rest, whispering to herself that a good grandmother shouldn't be tired. But the truth is, fatigue is not weakness. It is the body's way of saying enough. And yet Eleanor ignores it, day after day, until exhaustion becomes her baseline. This is the cruel irony of caregiving in old age. The very act of giving love can quietly drain the strength to love yourself. A small injury, a sleepless night, a persistent ache, these no longer feel like minor setbacks. They become barriers to joy itself. Instead of watching the sunset in peace, Eleanor rubs her sore knees, too weary to walk to the garden. Instead of calling a friend, she collapses into bed, too drained for conversation. Her body, once the source of freedom, has become a quiet prisoner of fatigue. And then comes the resentment, subtle at first, then sharper as time passes. One evening, as Eleanor carefully chopped vegetables, Clara's voice cut across the kitchen. "How many times do I have to tell you? The kids don't like onions." The words were casual, but the tone was sharp. For Eleanor, it felt like a bucket of cold water. She wasn't a guest anymore. She wasn't even an equal. She was being corrected like an employee on probation. Moments like these left scars deeper than anyone could see. The warmth of family blurred into the sting of unspoken criticism. And outside the home, Eleanor's social world shrank. She saw her friends less and less. Invitations declined, phone calls unanswered, not because she didn't care, but because she simply had no time or energy left. Her hobbies, her small joys, her independence, all faded. She lived in a house full of people, yet she had never felt more alone. This is the silent paradox. You can be surrounded by love, yet feel starved of respect. You can live in a house echoing with laughter, yet hear nothing but your own loneliness. Eleanor's story is not unique. Around the world, countless elders are living this silent contradiction, seeking warmth but finding an invisible cage, loving their families deeply, but slowly losing themselves in the process. And if we ignore these truths, we risk not only their happiness, but their health, their dignity, and their very sense of self. Philosophers across centuries have warned us. The greatest poverty is not the lack of money, but the loss of choice. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius Epictetus, they all repeated a simple truth. Control lies not in the world around us, but in our own will, our own decisions. When that is stripped away, when our days are dictated not by desire but by duty, something essential begins to erode. Eleanor didn't lose her savings, she didn't lose her home, she didn't lose her health entirely. What she lost was the ability to say, "Today, this is what I want to do." Psychologists today echo this ancient wisdom. Decades of research in human development, especially in older age, point to two anchors of well-being: autonomy and purpose. Autonomy, the freedom to make your own choices however small. Purpose, the sense that what you do matters. But here's the catch. Purpose must be chosen, not imposed. Eleanor's purpose was quietly rewritten for her. Yes, caring for family is noble. Yes, she loves her grandchildren. But the noblest purpose loses its glow when it is forced rather than embraced. It stops being meaning. It becomes obligation. That is the line where joy fades into resentment. But it didn't have to be this way. There were other paths Eleanor could have chosen. Paths that balanced love with dignity, family with freedom. She could have moved close to her family, rather than into their home. A small apartment down the street, a cozy condo nearby. That way she could visit often, share meals, babysit when she wanted, yet still return to her own sanctuary when she needed rest. She could have set clear boundaries. I'll help with homework twice a week, but mornings are mine. I'll babysit Fridays, but Saturdays are for my book club. Simple lines in the sand that protect her energy and preserve her sense of self. She could have shared responsibilities. Instead of silently carrying the load of cooking, cleaning, childcare, she could have asked, "What are we all contributing?" Responsibility, when shared, strengthens bonds. But when dumped on one person, it corrodes love into resentment. Eleanor could also have explored other ways of staying close. Family dinners every Sunday, sleepovers with the grandkids, holidays spent together. Moments that build memory and love without draining her reserves day after day. Because love does not demand the sacrifice of the self. Real love, the kind that lasts, requires space to breathe. It requires freedom. Eleanor's story asks us, what is the life you want to live in your later years? Will it be one written by the expectations of others, or by the gentle, deliberate choices of your own hand? That difference between imposition and choice may be the difference between surviving and truly living. So, what's the real takeaway here? It's not wrong to want closeness. It's not wrong to long for the laughter of grandchildren in the living room, or the joy of sharing meals every evening. Those things are precious. But closeness doesn't have to mean surrendering yourself. Togetherness doesn't have to require erasing your own needs. Before making a decision, before saying yes to moving in, before rearranging your life entirely, pause. Ask yourself some deeper questions. Will I still be me in this new arrangement? Will I have mornings that belong to me, afternoons for rest, evenings for quiet reflection? Will I have time to laugh with friends, pursue hobbies, nurture my health? If the answer is no, then perhaps the arrangement needs rethinking. Talk openly with your family before taking that step. These conversations may feel awkward, even selfish, but they are necessary. Ask, what are the boundaries? What are the duties we will share? What is mine, what is yours, and what will we do together? Define expectations clearly. If you're expected to provide care, when and how often? If you're cooking, who else is helping? If you're watching the children, when do you get your days off? Don't assume, don't hope, decide together before resentments begin to quietly grow. Because love, genuine love, does not demand endless sacrifice. Love thrives in balance. It withers in resentment. And remember this. If you are in your golden years, your joy, your well-being, your peace of mind, they matter just as much as your family's needs. Too often, elders are told their role is to give, to pour out, to bend until they break. But you are not only a caregiver. You are not only a helper. You are a whole person with dreams, preferences, limits, and dignity. Your later years should be a time to reflect, to savor, to pursue the things you once postponed. Don't let the dream of togetherness turn into a cage you never intended to step into. You can choose closeness and freedom, family love and personal peace. The key is honesty, courage, and boundaries. Eleanor's story isn't just about her. It's a mirror. For anyone facing that decision, let her story be a reminder. Your life is still your own. Guard it carefully. Shape it intentionally. Because in the end, the greatest gift you can give your family is not endless sacrifice, but a version of yourself that is healthy, peaceful, and authentically alive. And her memory began slipping. Her doctor gently explained, "It's not just your brain, Clara. It's the loneliness. It's the loss of purpose." Her story is not rare. It is the hidden danger of this living arrangement. Because while moving in may solve immediate problems, a fall risk, a financial gap, it can quietly strip away the very things that keep you alive in the long run. Independence, friendships, a sense of worth, and above all, purpose. And without purpose, the human heart shrinks. The mind dulls. The days blur. And even though your body is under the same roof as family, your spirit feels more alone than ever. Of all the dangers that come with moving in with your children, this last one may be the most devastating and the most permanent. It's not just about your comfort, or your independence, or even your health. It's about your legacy. When you make the decision to merge households, you are also, often without realizing it, merging finances, responsibilities, and assets. And unless you've taken strong, proactive legal steps, you could be putting everything you've built over a lifetime at risk. Here's the reality. Many older adults enter this arrangement informally. No contracts, no legal clarity, just trust and love. My children will look after me, you think. We're family. But when it comes to money, property, and inheritance, trust without structure can turn into the most painful vulnerability. Consider property. Maybe you own a home, but when you move in with your children, you decide to sell it. You put the money toward their mortgage, or you sign over the deed for simplicity. At first, it feels like a generous and practical solution. But what happens if the relationship sours? What happens if divorce, debt, or bankruptcy strike your child's household? Suddenly, the home you helped pay for or once owned outright is tied up in legal disputes, creditors' claims, or family tension. You've lost not only your independence, but also your safety net. Or take finances. Often, adult children encourage their parents to consolidate bank accounts for convenience. They may ask for power of attorney just in case. And while many children are honest and responsible, too many cases exist where this power is misused. Coercion, undue influence, quiet withdrawals, decisions made on your behalf that serve their interests, not yours. The elder ends up stripped of control, watching helplessly as decades of savings disappear. Wikipedia documents many examples of elder financial abuse under multigenerational living arrangements. Here's another truth. Legal blindness. Without consulting elder law attorneys or putting everything in writing, you may assume that family agreements will hold weight in the eyes of the law. They often don't. As firms like Cramfield Sumner LLP point out, failing to formalize caregiving agreements, property transfers, or financial responsibilities can create messy, painful disputes down the road. Siblings may argue over what was promised. Children may disagree about what's fair. Courts may step in, and by then it's too late. And let's not ignore benefits. By transferring assets or giving up property without guidance, you could unintentionally jeopardize eligibility for Medicaid, housing assistance, or other forms of public aid. What seemed like a loving move could end up costing you not only your estate, but also access to resources you may desperately need later in life. The emotional cost of this is enormous. Imagine spending your final years realizing that everything you worked for, every dollar saved, every brick of the house you built, every heirloom meant for your grandchildren, has been swallowed by poor planning, family tension, or exploitation. That your story, your values, your legacy are at risk of disappearing. And the hardest part? Most of this doesn't happen in dramatic bursts. It happens quietly. A signature here. Check there.